Hello and welcome to part two. I actually had not intended to record two videos for this folder, but I actually ran out of recording time with the previous video. I was getting a notification that my computer was out of storage space and it wasn't giving me any more recording time. So I was not planning to do it that way, but I had to go in and clear up some space, and here I am. I'm back. And so I'm just going to pick up where I left off, and we don't have too much further to go with this presentation. But I was on this slide here, and I was talking about um, once Gilgamesh makes it past Sadurai's tavern, he eventually makes it to the land of Utnapishtim, aka the Distant One, who is the ferryman, and he is going to be the one ultimately uh, who gives Gilgamesh the greatest assistance as far as giving him the thing which he seeks. Um, but I think what's going to be interesting about the Distant One is the story that he tells Gilgamesh about where he came from, because one of the things that he talks about is surviving a great flood. And so this is another interesting biblical parallel of the Epic of Gilgamesh, which again leads us to beg a lot of questions here about why there are so many similarities between the Bible and the Epic of Gilgamesh. Well, I don't have all those answers, but that might be something worth looking into. Again, thinking about your semester research project down the road, if that's a research question that is of interest to you, because the stories do come from very similar parts of the world, very much the same regions. So just some things to think about there when we think about the origins of these stories. But according to the Distant One's story, he has survived the Great Flood, and he is going to be destined to be the one who essentially gives Gilgamesh, or helps him to find the gift of immortality, with some help from his wife as well, which gets back to what we were talking about with the aid of females to Gilgamesh on this journey. But let's move on and talk about what happens in the next tablet. So the Distant One, or Utnapishtim, gives Gilgamesh a plant, and he tells him, now there's been a lot of speculation and debate about exactly what type of plant it was. I don't know. I don't think that's really all that important to know necessarily. But now Gilgamesh is over the moon because this is everything that he's been searching for, and all of his trials and tribulations have led him here. And he's been given this plant. It's literally put into his hand. All he has to do is eat from the plant, and he will live forever. That's what he is promised. And so he is on his way back to Uruk, and he has the plant in his boat with him. So picture this, right? So he is paddling along, he's in his boat, he is on his way back to Uruk with what he envisions will be the great plant that's going to give him the fountain of youth and the fountain of immortality. And lo and behold, a serpent arises from out of the water and snatches the plant out of his boat. And so the snake ends up being the one who consumes the plant of immortality. Now, again, a lot of biblical parallels. All right, think about the story of Adam and Eve, for example. Forbidden to eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. All right. And Eve is deceived by the serpent. There's some allusions to that here as well. So I think the big question that this story leaves us with, in debating this is, did Gilgamesh achieve what he sought? Because you could argue on the one hand, yes, he is given immortality, but he also loses the gift of immortality. Then he has to go home to Uruk essentially empty-handed. But the story also tells us that because of all the life's lessons that he learned on this journey, he becomes a much better king and a much better leader to his people. And so in that regard, because he becomes the great king that the people of Uruk wanted him to be, he does achieve a kind of immortality. Right? He achieves immortality in the sense that we're still reading about him today. We're still talking about him in classes like this. We're still reading the Epic of Gilgamesh. After it was rediscovered, of course. As we said before, it did disappear for several thousand years, but then was discovered again. But in a way, Gilgamesh did achieve that immortality. But it is an interesting question to kind of knock about there. Okay, so those are, I think, the key points to take away from the conclusion of the Epic of Gilgamesh. Again, you're going to have a quiz to close out this folder and to close out this module. Make sure that you complete that. So there should actually be 3 items total, 3 assessment items total that you will complete for this module. All right, and I'll look forward to your responses, and I will see you in the next module. Bye-bye.